So we're going to talk about biotech, that sleepy cottage industry that no one really cares about. There's not much going on, nothing going on in government. It's been pretty quiet the last couple of years. But no, we're going to get to some of the macroeconomic issues that the industry faces in a little bit. But I think it's appropriate to start where biotech actually originated, which is innovative science. And I want to start, Sergio, with you because you're right, we did invest in Sergio's company, which is right here in San Diego, developing a really interesting new strategy that I think has the chance to revolutionize one aspect of drug development, particularly in the oncology space. And it's called covalent biologics. It's one of those technologies that I think in a long line of what could be real breakthrough technology. So Sergio, tell us about that, but also talk a little bit about the importance of innovation in biotech and the development of these new modalities.
Well, thanks for the invite, and Mike, thanks for the intro, and also thanks for leading the Series A. So, yes, Enlaza Therapeutics is, well, I believe it. I'm the CEO. I pitch the propaganda. It's an absolute interesting platform that can be transformative. But let me just tell you a little bit about what it does. I'm looking at the clock here, and we have a very short amount of time. What we can do that's different than what other people can't do is we can essentially Velcro a drug onto a tumor, and then that drug that circulates gets excreted, and you're left with the patient with the drug on the tumor and nowhere else. So you get better, efficacy, and you get better safety. And that's essentially what you're trying to do when you're developing new drugs, make them safe and make them work. But I did want to highlight that, like Enlaza is transformative in this space, and that's how science works. Science is incremental science is great, but what really changes our industry is the ability to make these big steps. And 30 years ago, we were just doing small molecules, which are the pills you take. And then we transitioned to antibodies, which are things you get infused. But we've had so much innovation in this space: cell therapy, gene editing, a lot of stuff, a lot of new technologies. And the investment that Steve and the JPM team made is to invest in things that are transformational. And that's how science moves forward. That's where you take those leaps and bounds. 30 years ago, you would have a disease that would kill you, and now you're living a healthy life. So that's just a little bit on transformation.
That's fantastic, fantastic. And John, you've been an incredibly successful investor, and you focused, particularly with your firm BioCube, also right here in San Diego, on investing in very early stage companies. That, from my experience in industry, is where you tend to find the innovation. What other innovative strategies are you seeing coming out of some of these early stage biotech companies?
Yeah, sure. Can everybody hear me? All right,
yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for having me today. Yeah, I think, investing at the early stage, at least for me, is probably the most exciting part of the sector, because you really get to see when these transformational technologies are ready to leave the lab or wherever research institute they were being funded in to come in to see if you can make a product out of them. So a lot of the areas that I tend to focus on are actually fairly similar to what you all are doing at Enlaza. I love being able to take known modalities and improve upon them. So for example, one area that we've been focusing a lot on is a technology called bispecific antibodies. Monoclonal antibodies have been around for a long time. They've been very impactful and profound drugs. Now we've understood how to engineer them in a way that you can actually take two drugs and put them together into one. And what that does is it opens up a lot of novel areas of pharmacology for you. You can think through applications in immunology, oncology, potentially even bringing immune cells into different tumor sites. So I think there's a lot of interest and excitement from our firm in that space.
That's great. I attended a JP Morgan private bank conference back in February, and the CEO of NVIDIA was a speaker at the conference. And when he was asked, where will AI have the hugest impact and the most immediate impact, his answer was healthcare. So hard to talk about innovation without looking at the impact of what AI might bring to the field of biotech. Sergio, thoughts about this? How important is it? Where do you see it playing out?
So AI, in my mind, is a little controversial in the context of drug discovery. When you think about AI, where it can have an impact on healthcare, I think clinical clinical data, analyzing that data. And the reason why I say this in the world of where we sort of live, which is early stage drug discovery, is people do not share information in drug discovery. Merck doesn't give Pfizer, Pfizer doesn't give AstraZeneca. We have different companies we don't share. And your AI is only as good as the database that's in it, right? So when you query a question, when you query it, you need a great database. So I think that AI is going to be tremendously transformative in the world of drug discovery, but there has to be a mechanism to get all that data out that we can actually publicly share and be able to query those databases in order to sort of get something as good as, when you ask ChatGPT, hey, write me a, whatever, and then boom, you get it. Well, that's because all that information is out there on the internet now. So I think opening a lot of the data sets that work, don't work, and sharing that will allow AI to be more transformative. I think today, clinical analysis is probably the best place for it.
Let me contextualize that a little bit. So yes, got drugs approved at Alexion. We got one of our products approved on the basis of treating 37 patients, rare disease. But the reason for that was every single patient in the trial responded to the drug. That's highly unusual. And I think what Sergio is pointing to, if we could use AI to look at mountains of clinical data and start to understand who might respond to a new product versus who doesn't, you wouldn't need 1,000 patient trials. You could get by with smaller trials, much higher response rates. Think what that does to medicine as we know it. The cost of trials come way down. The speed by which products get developed accelerates as well. So I think you're absolutely right. John, anything to add to that conversation?
So actually the most recent investment we made is doing exactly that. So the way I think about AI is there's capabilities and then features. I think AI is in the capabilities phase right now, so it's helping us improve efficiencies. Is it through data analysis? Is it through finding clinical patients? Is it through understanding complex biology? I don't know yet, right? I think the feature that we all hope to find is novel target discovery. And I don't think AI is quite there yet. But what we did with this most recent investment is we noticed that over the past 5 to 6 years, there's been these longitudinal databases being formed, a lot of the time in Europe because there's less HIPAA compliancy issues, but where they've actually tracked patients with various diseases over the course of their life. So they not only measure their genetics, they measure their phenotypic outcome, they know what drugs they were on, and they also got to see what the outcomes were from those studies. So now you have very large terabytes of data that AI and machine learning can help you get through quicker. You can clean that data, you can start to generate novel insights, and through that with a team of clinicians and statisticians, we'll be using it to find novel ways to go after chronic kidney disease. I think it's a very powerful tool. I think it will definitely change the world. I think in biotech and in drug discovery, you need to be careful about where you're utilizing that right now.
I think it's going to have a major impact also on medical device technology as well. And that's probably where we're going to see it impact healthcare first. That's real versus in a pill, right? I think that's
Totally
going to be
agree.
important.
And also I was at a conference at AbbVie, and they've been able to shave off 3 to 6 months of an NDA, so a new drug application, based on using AI to help them enroll their clinical trials more efficiently. And so all of those types of applications I think are here, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Well, let's turn to maybe a less favorable topic, but I think we need to address it. There's been a lot of changes in the last 100 days. We have a new FDA commissioner, a new head of CBER, we have a new head of NIH, fewer people have jobs. How does this impact our industry, and are we concerned we're going to lose our competitive edge? Because the U.S. has always been the place where innovation has happened first, and we're pretty proud of that. But it's a confusing time for a lot of people out there. So how do you want to talk about this, or maybe you don't?
I'll let John go first.
All right, I'll take a stab at it first. I think it starts off, it's almost every day I wake up and I check the news or I check Twitter to see what's the new update or the new change. And the way, at least, given we all focus in the biotech sector, there's 2 main things that I've seen that are kind of creating disturbances. One is just the general approach around the tariffs has created and a huge amount of uncertainty. So when we think about biotech, you not only need to think about the scientists and the people doing the experiments, but also where does that capital come from to fund those experiments? How do we build our companies? Yeah. And with this level of uncertainty, the way I think about it is almost a deep, thick fog has descended on the industry, and people don't quite know where to go or how to react until we have clarity around what's going to happen on the global macro stage. Then secondly, we've been lucky enough to also have the FDA and the NIH see significant changes, which adds another level of uncertainty. So I think most of the people in the sector currently, we all wish we had a crystal ball, but we're trying to do our best with understanding, what's happening and keeping on top of all of these changes. I will say to try to not be totally doom and gloom. For example, the new FDA commissioner, Marty Makary, he's given a few interviews over the past couple of weeks, and I think if you took those comments in a bubble outside of all of the other uncertainty and everything else that was going on, our industry would be quite excited about it. I heard a lot of things that we want to hear. How do you bring more products to patients faster? How do we create more efficiencies? How do we look at the FDA and make sure that small biotechs can compete with pharma? So there are some positives there. It's just really hard to know how positive they're going to be and when it's going to play out.
I think that's right. I've been in this industry a long time. I remember, the last time the FDA got modernized was through the Modernization Act of 1997. And it was a lot of the same sort of commentary that we're hearing from the new. So maybe if we look at this a little bit with rose-colored glasses, we see phase 2 of an FDA modernization, and maybe we end up better after the dust is all settled. But I do worry about the innovation thing. We were talking about this earlier. That's the NIH issue, right, versus the FDA.
Yeah, look, we all three of us are investors, right? So we're in the business of trying to, I'm going to joke and say pretend that we can evaluate risk, right? It's a very risky business. And we all have different formulas and different feelings and how we put together an asset and say, here's a level of risk that is acceptable for us to make this size of investment. But what we have is happening now is we have new variables in that equation. So in the past, if the IPO market was closed and you can adjust, you can say, okay, I don't have an exit strategy for an IPO. I need to go private financing route, and you can figure it out and react. So what I can say today, could change tomorrow, but today is that we know there's new variables. It's too early to know how that's really going to impact. I mean, when I'm hanging out with my friends, we have different feelings about it. But in the context of really thinking about the impact on, building a company, evaluating risk, it's just too early to know. Are these variables real? Are they impactful? And how do I react to them? And we're going to have to. But today, I think it's a little too early to know exactly how we're going to do it. My big concern right now is as you highlight, is innovation. Innovation starts, so I talked earlier about cell therapy, gene editing, all this stuff, it comes out of academic centers. And if we're not funding those appropriately and rolling those technologies out to new companies, they're not innovating, they're not starting new companies, we're not creating jobs, we're not transacting companies of pharma, creating better drugs for patients. I mean, there's this whole life cycle of drug discovery that starts in the academic centers in this country. This is what we do, we innovate. And that's my biggest concern. It's not going to hit us today, but it could potentially hit us, 5 to 10 years
Yeah,
later.
and I think the other thing, as I was out a year ago raising our first fund for JP Morgan, I traveled the world, right? That's what you do when you raise a fund. So in the Middle East, what do I see? I see the government is deep sequencing every citizen, in the Emirates. I mean, to learn about genetic deficiencies within their population. Travel to China, you see biotech companies working 3 shifts, versus 1 shift. I mean, I do worry the world is catching up, and they're catching up fast. So I think this is something, we all have to be aware of. But on that note, I want to flip it now and turn it towards, how does that change, Sergio, your thinking? You're operating a biotech company, and you're operating a biotech company in some pretty turbulent times. When you think of your business model, your financing strategy, partnership opportunities, and really, John, same question for you as an investor in these companies. Has the business model shifted, or does it need to shift?
So you're now the second board member that's asked me that. So
But I can do that.
yeah, you can. You can ask anything you want. So it's really hard. I think the worst thing to do right now to a company is whiplash, right? You can't go, oh, that happened, we're going to do this, and then you go back and you switch it back and forth. So you have to be very conservative about this and be very sure. So the way I'm thinking about it is, as I said earlier, I know these variables are there. I don't know how they're going to impact us today. So what we can do today is manage growth. That's one thing. We can, deprioritize things that we know are not critical path, that maybe we're trying to do more, do more with less, right? So I think today the approach we're taking at Enlaza is to take, revisit all the plans that we had, narrow down the focus, and wait for that sort of, clarity on what these new variables are going to do. So I think it's not just wait and see, because I don't think that's responsible. It's wait and see, build a model, build 2 or 3 different models, which we do have. Because was it 6 months ago with Biosecure Act, and 12 months ago, the question is, can we work with a Chinese company, right? And so then we sought other opportunities and built new budgets. If we didn't go there, we went to a Western-based company. But now it's more, you have to do it manufactured here in the U.S. That's a whole different formula.
Yep.
Because the truth is that doesn't exist, right? Or if the entire industry has to do that, the queues are going to be so massive that your cash burn can't sustain it. So I think today what we're doing is we're acknowledging it's real. We're evaluating sort of where we're at on our cash burn, and trying to manage growth and build partnerships with pharma who has cash, in order to help supplement some of our, bring in non-dilutive funding that way, as opposed to thinking we're going to go out and raise a ton of new money, right? Today is going to take longer.
Yeah, thanks. So John, the way I was thinking about this, and I'd love you to address this, thinking back to, 2020, 2021, during COVID, or on the heels of COVID, interest rates were very, very low. Money was cheap. Money was freely flowing. Funds were being raised. Lots of companies were getting capitalized. Companies were going public very early. That model didn't work out so well, right? And so you invest in early stage companies. Well, so do you, Sergio. And we all do, actually, all 3 of us. When you think about the success factors that you need to see in place today to get excited about investing in an early stage company, what would that look like? What do you look for?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So just to reframe it so everybody has a sense, during COVID, the biotech markets were completely ripping. Almost any company could be funded. And, for right or wrong reasons, we were also making a lot of progress. People saw Moderna with the vaccines. There was all these new innovative technologies. And now we're kind of paying for that. And I think, as I think about this, the art of being an early stage biotech investor is not investing at the cutting edge, but investing on the bleeding edge. And so what do I mean by that?
Yeah, what do you mean by that? That's interesting.
So the cutting edge is these new technologies that are super exciting, but they have yet to prove that they could actually be a product for a patient. And what I always remind myself is, it is incredibly hard to have an idea in a lab and actually make that into a therapeutic that gets into a human and properly treats their disease. And so I think the industry as a whole during that time got very excited by a lot of these cutting edge technologies. CRISPR, for example, gene editing. It is amazing, and there are certain small use cases where it's worked, but a lot of capital went into that sector and has actually resulted in no products. And so for me, I think the main goal is to try to find that line where you're still doing something super transformational and innovative. For example, Enlaza, right? Using antibodies, but now they found a new way to covalently attach that to the target. It's not super cutting edge, right? It's not like they've discovered antibodies that are covalent before anybody knew what an antibody was, but it is bringing something clearly differentiated that you could then open up a whole other therapeutic landscape. And so I think that's kind of the art of how I look at investment deals. Everybody has their own way of doing it.
And I would assume you're encouraging your companies to be much more careful in their cash management and their spend, right?
Everything nowadays, what I'm seeing in the market is there's actually larger rounds being done for fewer products. So 5 years ago, you might have been able to fund 2 or 3 programs. get them to a certain point and go raise out more capital. Now, instead of doing 2 or 3, you're tending to focus on 1, maybe 1.5, and all the rest of that capital is just giving you a longer runway so that you can get to clinical data, because financing risk is real in this environment. It's tough to raise those follow-on rounds, and a lot of investors are having to pony up their additional cash to just keep the companies alive. So,
Yeah, I'm going to embarrass you a little bit, Sergio, because the other thing that happened in 2021 is, as John points out, so many companies got capitalized. There was a lack of strong management. And I think, Sergio, you represent strong management. It's one of the reasons JP Morgan was, interested in investing, not just the technology, but good people. I'm assuming you both feel like that's something that we have to really focus on today as we build these companies. We got away from that, I think, right?
Yeah, I think that the people part is just as important as the technology part, right? And yeah, you're right. COVID was during the COVID years, it was very interesting. The joke I made is we raised the seed round for Enlaza in my pajamas, right? You're in front of a computer screen. I put a good shirt on, right? But you can't see below here. So it was different times, but even part of the company build is about getting the right people on board. So I definitely agree with that. I mean,
so with that in mind, let's talk about San Diego. Is this a good place to find seasoned management? And 1, 2, what makes this a good environment for the biotech ecosystem? You guys both are here. I'm not. I'm in New York, but want to get your thoughts about why here.
I'll jump in as a new guy, and then you can tell me if it all checks out. So I'd been coming here I started coming, I guess, 10 years ago for the first investment that I found through Impact Biomedicines, and got to know the community. And the thing that stood out to me, I've invested in Europe, I've invested in Boston, I've invested in San Francisco, is this was by far and away the most collaborative ecosystem I'd ever been a part of. I'd never really seen an environment where companies that are even maybe potentially competitive, we're all at drinks, hanging out, trying to help each other, give advice. And I think it comes down to the fact that this is the 3rd largest biotech hub in the US, so it's not quite as scaled as Boston or San Francisco, and it's very dense. So everybody knows everybody. If you're a bad actor, you'll get found out pretty quick here, right? And people don't really have time for that. So that was the number one thing that highlighted to me this was a place I wanted to be. I loved the community. And then on top of it, you have very successful repeat entrepreneurs. Yeah. People that have sold companies, and because it's such a great place to live, not only from the weather, but kids, schools, people want to stay if they can. And so there's a captive set of entrepreneurs that would like to stay here and keep building companies.
And I hear that there's a bit of an influx south from San Francisco to San Diego more recently. There's migration from the north to the south. Is that true, or?
We don't let them in usually. But look, I mean, there's no doubt that San Diego is the place to be, with not only for lifestyle, but for the biotech community. You've got multiple research institutes, the high quality research institutes, lots of exciting science going on there. You've got an engaged community in biotech. You have lots of camaraderie, between the investors, lots of VC money coming into San Diego, and lots of successful exits. And those people then go out and start more companies again. I rarely have ever met someone who's had a good exit that said, I'm retiring. They go, I want to do it again, right? I think the community here is pretty vibrant and engaged, as I said. So I just don't see that when I go to Boston, and certainly in San Francisco, people go, I never make it up there. And then, it's very regional. So I think, but the most important part is really the talent pool. When we start a company here, we never have problems finding people that have experience, that want to be part of building. And so, but I will characterize San Diego a little differently in that we're more of an early stage community, right? So commercialization is rare.
Yeah.
It does exist, but it's not as big as in other areas. So it's sort of this community of entrepreneurs, company starters, early stage biotech, which is certainly where I love to live.
It's fantastic. Well, we promised we'd leave 5 minutes for questions. We're almost there, but in 10 seconds or less, if there's an entrepreneur in the audience who wants to build a biotech company here, one piece of advice from each of you.
if anyone's ever seen me on the panel, Biotech's peaks and valleys, celebrate the peaks, and weather the valleys with I think with strong leadership, because it's really in the valleys where you learn sort of how you are as a leader, and be able to accept that, because a lot of people will get in that valley and they go, oh my God, I got to jump ship and go somewhere else, and that's not a sustainable model. So I think that, that's usually what I tell people: get ready for it. It is stormy, but it's a really, really fun ride.
John?
For me, I think it's product differentiation. So think about the patient, think about the product or drug that you're trying to make. It starts here and it'll end up there. And so it's really critical to get that right at the beginning.
Thank you. I'm opening up to, I don't know if there are microphones out there, but if there's anyone in the audience with a question for any one of the three of us, we're happy to take one. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. If the government, federal government, continues for a period of years to not fund the basic research, is there any capacity in the private sector to capitalize and fund basic?
That's a great question. I'll take the lead, because I literally have been living that world for the last 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks, my partners and I have gotten more calls from academics working on interesting projects that are worried that their funding is going to go away. It's an opportunity for private capital to step in. I honestly, though, I don't know if that's a sustainable model, but it is going to open up opportunities for us as investors in the immediate term, but I worry about the long term. I don't think that is sustainable. I think we're going to continue to rely and need to rely on government funding for pure basic academic science.
I totally agree with the last statement, because a lot of what we could fund, that's a certain set of science, but where these big transformational discoveries come from is often not interesting to the private sector. It's been worked on for 10 or 15 years. People were told they were crazy, and then, boom, the big experiment comes. And so we need to make sure we protect, funding basic research and having that capability here.
The timeline is just not acceptable for return on investment when you invest in basic science. So.
I take China as a good example, where, they're producing Me Too drugs faster and cheaper than we can do right now in the US. But I worry a lot when they start to bring innovative products to the market that are first in class or best in class, we've got a problem. It's not here today, but I don't think it's even a decade off if this were to continue. So thanks for your question. Any other questions?
Hi, and thank you to Mike Kren for the incredible work he's done with the startup and VC group. Erwin Jacobs spoke earlier about some difficulty that they had at Qualcomm recruiting local talent, and that was what led to some investments in K-12 education locally. Can you speak about that in the biotech sector, difficulty finding talent here, not only at schools like UCSD, but also the new program at MiraCosta that has a bachelor's certificate that's allowing some students to go straight into a Thermo Fisher?
Yeah, I've been with Avalon Ventures, now Avalon Bioventures, for 17 years, and building companies over the years. I would say in general, because that's a long period of time, we've not had any problems finding talent. Usually talent comes from a lot of experience at another company. People just continue to move up. But I would say the take home for me is the reason why I love living here, doing what we do here, is because the talent pool is so good. So, if you're trying to grow to 1,200 people in a year, yes, that's going to be a problem. But if you're growing organically, where you're going from, a small company of 3 to 5 people, like at Enlaza, where we've grown to 50 people, we've hired some really amazing talent, and for the most part, haven't had any issues. So I would say the talent pool is great.
So I've been given the hook. They're actually not going to come out with a physical hook, but I've been told we have to exit. So sorry about that, but thank you for your attention. Thank you guys for your contribution. Thank you.